Well, I told you last week that we would cover the Heartland Institute's Global Warming Truth or Swindle Conference going on here in New York City like it was the second coming of Jesus himself. After all, if this were a traditional gathering of global warming alarmists, the media would be everywhere. But since it's full of hundreds of credible, mainstream scientists who happen to disagree with their peers, it's completely ignored. In fact, the organizers of the conference actually had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy ads in papers like the New York Times just to get the word out that it was happening. Two people who were not only there today, but also spoke in workshops this morning and were on my program on radio earlier. Willie Soon, who is a physicist at the Solar and Stellar Physics Division of Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and Bob Carter. He's a professor at the Marine Geophysical Laboratory at James Cook University. Guys, I see the swarm of reporters behind you now covering the conference. Was there a single reporter there today covering this conference?
I have only personally seen one reporter that is of some consequence, would be Andy Revkin of New York Times, myself.
That is amazing. Bob, let me start with you. The whole thing that every American has seen is that Al Gore chart that has the CO2 and the temperature rise. Could you please dispel this, that CO2 leads temperature rise?
Well, the chart you're talking about, Glenn, is actually only for the last 100 years or so. And it shows that temperature increases in the first part of the 20th century, and then it decreases between 1940 and about 1980, and then it increases again up to the end of the century. If you plot on that graph, which is curvy, the carbon dioxide increasing graph, it doesn't correlate very well at all, and in particular, the fastest rate of increase of carbon dioxide took place after the Second World War at precisely the time that the temperature curve was actually cooling. Okay. So that makes it very difficult to argue that the carbon dioxide is causing the warming before and after that time.
Okay. And Willie, you're a Harvard physicist, so I'm a rodeo clown, so talk down to me here for a second. Tell me about the sun. You say the sun is actually giving more effect than anything I'm doing with my SUV.
Yes, indeed. That's what I found in my research. For example, when I start to look at when everybody was saying that the Arctic is melting, and so all that alarmism started to spread, so I started to look carefully into what the Arctic temperature is doing. And then when I started looking at that, by God, I'm beginning to see that it doesn't make any sense if we were to try to explain the Arctic temperature change with respect to just simply increasing atmospheric CO2. The reason is that there was this very large warming from about 1910 or so to 1930s to 1950s. At that time, as you know, there was basically very no CO2 increase at all, yet the Arctic was warming by almost a degree Celsius, which is about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then from 1940s or so to 1970, late 1970, the temperature in the Arctic started to cool while, you know, the CO2 was rising rapidly. So it just doesn't fit. And then the biggest surprise of my research is indeed that when I started to look at how the sun's light energy has been changing, the sun's light output has been changing over that time period, it fitted that changes in the Arctic temperature almost perfectly. Actually, it's a very significant findings. Yeah. And
we included this in my book, An Inconvenient Book, and it is
right.
when you look at the chart, it's exact. I mean, it is really amazing. And Bob, you say that well, you tell me, the Arctic at one point was much warmer than it is now, and now the sea ice is bigger than it has been since we've been measuring it. True or false?
Glenn, it depends which pole we're talking about. What you just summarized is true for the South Pole, that the sea ice around Antarctica, just by coincidence this year, happens to have reached an all-time historic high. The sea ice in the Northern Hemisphere, in the Arctic Ocean, has, as you've heard on the news many, many times, been decreasing for the last few years. However, it has recently turned around, and there it is also increasing, and the area is quite large this winter.
How could people on the Al Gore side explain that one pole is getting colder with more ice and the other pole is getting warmer?
With difficulty, I would say, and you should ask them. I'll be very interested to hear their answer.
They don't. They think I'm a fascist. They don't answer those questions. Willie, in the last 9 years, is the globe getting warmer, colder, or staying the same?
Okay. Factually, I think you are referring to the I would refer to the best temperature record that we do have, which is those measurements that is done from orbiting satellites. And indeed, those satellites were showing that from perhaps 1998 to about 2008 or so, actually as late as the data that just came out, which is around January 2008, you would not find the warming trend that has been, of course, predicted, because at that particular time period, from 1998 to January of 2008, the CO2 level actually has been rising quite substantially, actually by some order of maybe 20 parts per million, which is quite significant. Yet, of course, you do not see that the climate system just simply willingly go along with the carbon dioxide rise. So that is actually indeed one of the big surprise, actually, of what is happening now on planet Earth.
Bob, you say that global cooling you think is a bigger threat now. What does that mean?
What is certain, Glenn, is that it will either cool or warm next. We don't know which, and if you wish to know which, you should flip a coin, because the chances are roughly 50-50. Right. If it cools rather than warms, then the effects of that will be much more damaging on our particularly ability to grow crops in the mid-latitudes.
Guys, I only have time for a yes or no. Yes or no, this is what the climate does, this is what the planet does. It's constantly getting warmer and colder. Yes or no?
Yes. One after the other.
Thank you. It's a consensus, America.